Mhm. Oh, I'm not sure. So here we are here. We're on mute. Hello.
Hello, John. It's Wayne
Hey.
here. I'm assuming that's you, Rob, behind the town hall signature.
Good evening.
How are you?
Feeling well, thank you.
That's great.
Nice to have some cool weather.
Actually, it was a good day today. Good working day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, who are we looking for? Marie? Steve?
Yes. Hi, guys.
Is that you?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah,
Okay.
in the flesh.
All right, looks like we have a quorum. So I'm going to call this meeting to order at 6:02. Members present, Wayne Wilson, Rob Thibault,
John
Yeah.
Cool.
John Coulon, and Steve Viviano.
I am here. Yep.
Okay, did everyone get a chance to read the minutes of the previous meeting?
I read them.
I did. Yes.
Anyone have any omissions, additions, or corrections to make?
I have no edits.
No, and anyone?
I make a motion to accept the minutes as submitted.
Someone want to second that?
I'll second that.
Okay, so let's go vote. Steve,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So unanimous decision to accept the minutes. Okay, so let's move on. Refresh me, Rob. Are we just continued discussion? Is that our next agenda item?
That's what we've got on the agenda, Wayne. Yep, absolutely.
Okay. All right, guys, so yeah, let me adjust my my camera mode here. Okay, so I think my impression is that we're at a point where we have to, or we should be, I shouldn't say have to, that's probably not the right terminology, but anyway, we should be like committing to paper some kind of a final draft of whatever rules and regulations that we've been hashing out over the past few weeks. That sound like a reasonable assumption to anybody else?
I would like to do that very, very much. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to keep just getting on here every 2 weeks and kind of rehashing the same old thing. So I think what we really want to do, or what I think we should do, is decide what has to be in a regulation, and then we could add to that with what we might want to see. And we also should think about what we don't want to see, right? Let's kind of make a mental list of what we want to put into this list of rules, what we don't want to put in the list of rules. I really don't want to make this list of rules so cumbersome that it just becomes like a giant monster in and of itself. But
Wayne?
if there has to be that way to make it work, then that's what it will be. Go ahead, John.
I think it's good that we have this discussion multiple times, and at some meeting in the past, we agreed, and so I'm bringing it up here to reiterate that an essential part of recommended set of regulations for on this subject include referencing the building and health codes as a foundation for approaching compliance. All right.
Absolutely.
That's one part that's that is necessary. So we can just reiterate that. And then we get to what localizing, if anything, we think is necessary. Since building and health codes are statewide, what is it about our community that needs to be addressed and incorporated into these localized regulations?
Okay. All right. Now, 2 weeks ago, we had a conversation about what did or didn't happen in Linfield and what we should or shouldn't be doing relative to bylaws. I had a chance to go into it. I'm not sure who's ringing here, so. I have no idea. Anyway, so because part of our mission is to advise and suggest and so forth and so on relative to some future town meeting. We had Dan Script kind of gave us some guidance on that, but to be honest with you, there's a couple of things that he said that I can't agree with. One of them was that our current bylaw that says you can't have more than 2 guests in a single family home is totally irrelevant to this issue. And I just can't wrap my head around how that makes any sense. So, I mean, one of the things that I think we need to do, and I know we've talked about this before, was that I think we need to make short-term rental become an actual accessory use, listed as an accessory use in our zoning bylaw, just like a doctor's office and this and that, and there's certain accessory uses that are listed, and I think it needs to be on that list. Because if it's not on that list, you shouldn't be doing it. And someone want to give me some feedback on that?
I agree with you, Wayne. Basically, the bylaws that we have say that it's in section 4, I believe. The uses that are allowed and specifically not allowed are defined in that section 4. There's no mention of short-term rental, of course. But there is mention in 4.1, I think it is, section, that if it's not listed, then it's not allowed.
It does
So-
say that. Absolutely correct, Rob. It does.
So,
If it-
yeah,
list,
you're entirely correct that we do need to list this. Whether it's to allow it or not allow it, it still needs to be listed.
I think you're absolutely correct. I think to just ignore the fact that it's not mentioned in our zoning bylaws in any way, shape, or form is a big mistake. So,
My thoughts on it, guys, as I've chimed in,
go ahead.
the only reason I don't see how we could list it, again, it is, and I know, Wayne, you had said earlier on, we're ultimately here to create bylaws for Airbnb, VRBO, but my difficulty of understanding this, the people, we actually had someone called in early on and said they rent their house. They actually rent the house that they live in. They leave their stuff there. I don't know if they stated they went away for the season and then they came back, or how they did it, but they vacated their house and they rented it for a period, and then they came back and occupied their house. That could be the same situation if someone kept their house and rented it for the entire year. If any one of us said, you know what, I don't want to lose my house in Nahant, but I have to move to Colorado for a couple of years for business or for family, you wouldn't go to town hall and rezone your house or get an accessory use. It would be a residential application. Still, it would be a rental. So I know and I don't mean it biasly, but I know we're discriminating against Airbnb and VRBO, but if someone is renting their house for a residential use long-term and it requires nothing, but then if they're going to rent it off of an application short-term and it requires them to reclassify as an accessory use, how is that going to work for that family that leaves for 2 months and then comes back? They're going to come back and change the use again, and then when they want to leave again, they're going to change the use back. That's why I think it's not in the bylaws. If you wanted to rent your house today, you don't have to go up town hall and file for a permit to do so. You can rent your house. This is newfound technology, but you're just renting a residential house for a residential application. I know it's different now because you're doing it on a phone or on a computer, but that's like most things. You're getting food delivered from your house on a phone too. I mean, that's the age now. That's how people do things. And Airbnb could be, you could rent on Airbnb and stipulate you want a 12-month lease, you want a 30-day minimum stay. You could stipulate anything on there. So what we're pretty much telling people, hey, if you use the Airbnb platform, we're going to treat you differently, regardless of how you use it.
And that's exactly right, Steve. That's exactly right. It's exactly what we're going to do. We want to treat it differently. That's exactly the purpose of this, is to treat it differently.
So what if somebody, and again, I don't like what ifs or hypotheticals, but if somebody were to rent their house short term and not on an application, now they are back to the, no rules. I think whatever we do, we should make it broad enough, cast a broad enough net that it captures everything. I don't think that John and you, Wayne, are going to want to go out and inspect every single house every time, whatever. But I think for these mysterious accessory use Airbnbs and maybe parts of people's house, we should. But I think we should throw something out there that, encompasses, well, first of all, we need a definition on what short term is. but it encompasses if it's a traveling nurse, are they in the same net? If it's VRBO, if it's someone that made their own website up and they're renting it short term, if it's someone that's doing a month-to-month lease, in the month of February, it's under 30 days, so it's considered a short-term rental at that point.
All
I
right.
just think this way we're kind of making a block for speed.
Well, but I don't think you could compare the typical Airbnb rental situation to what would be otherwise considered a typical rental.
This is transient lodging. This is not a rental. This is transient lodging. It's the same thing as a hotel. That's how the state defines it.
I want to read you something from the town of Linfield court case in which the state Supreme Court decided that yes, the town of Linfield can prohibit it. Right? I'm going to read it to you. The SJC determined that short-term rental use of a one-family home is inconsistent with the zoning purpose of the single residence zoning district in which it is situated. That was their decision. It wasn't my decision. That was the Supreme Judicial Court of the state of Massachusetts. That he said stylish short-term rental violated the town's existing zoning bylaw and found that the ZBA acted within its authority in making the determination that a short-term rental was outside of the characteristics and parameters of a single-family residential zoning district. This is a decided case. This is already made precedent. So if that's what the SJC has decided, then you can't argue that I can just rent my house. It doesn't make sense. It's already been decided by the Supreme Judicial Court.
No, absolutely, and that's good information, and thank you. My question is now that net gets cast out for all single-family residential districts. That shuts them down. That shuts them down for anything except a 12-month annual lease, I guess.
Again,
because otherwise, how are we going to work it? Sorry, Wayne.
I just said I'm just reading a decision. I'm not going to try to, determine how they came to that conclusion because it doesn't say. I'm just reading what the decision was.
Right. And I'm saying if we adopted that, how
you can't make the
argument.
Nobody that can make the argument that, well, why can't I just do what I want to do? Because you can't. Just like you can't build a skyscraper and you can't open up a McDonald's in your backyard. I mean, that's kind of the whole point.
So and again, I'm trying to assist in any way I can here. We'll classify, let's say hypothetically we classified short-term rentals as an accessory use. What would the definition of one be?
It would be as defined by the state. We have the recent law passed 2018 that defines all of these types of rentals.
Right. So anything under 30 days, is it?
It's defined, it's short-term rental, and they define what short-term rental is.
Do you happen to have the definition to that?
I will pull it up. I'm looking for it now.
Let me read another paragraph from this decision from the SJC. Styler argued to the land court that his short-term rental should be allowed since short-term rentals were not specifically prohibited by the bylaws when he started. And then it says the land court held that prior to the town amending its bylaws, short-term rentals were already prohibited in a single-family residential zoning district in accordance with pre-existing zoning bylaws.
Right. Yeah, no, and I've read, you've enlightened me a lot on Linfield. I've read a little bit on it. There's a lot of literature on there. That's one far extreme, and then the other far extreme is, someone coming on here and saying, hey, look at wherever. They have absolutely no rules. And, you know, I think obviously the basis of this committee is to find somewhere in the middle. You know, I've started working on a list. I apologize. I kind of said last week I'd get it out. I think the most important thing, and I think I've brought it up a few times, so I'll throw myself under the bus as being most responsible, but I think we've dropped the ball. We haven't identified what the actual problems are in this town. We're going off of Linfield and Pennsylvania and wherever else, you know, whatever else fits our agenda, but we haven't actually sat back and said, this is what this town faces. This is the issues that this causes to this town. This is the good that this brings to the town. Is this, you know, let's put that on a scale. Is this something we want to allow at all? Is this something that is a benefit
I'm not
to the
saying that we
town?
shouldn't allow it, Steve. That's not anywhere near where I'm coming from. I just think that to not have it listed as a permitted use, it means it's not permitted. That's what the zoning bylaw specifically says. It says if it's not on this list, it's not permitted.
I think
Right.
that attempting to fix problems as they occur is always going to have us behind the ball. We see other communities looking at what they believe should be done. We've got examples all over the country of what's happening to cities and towns that didn't do anything and now find themselves upside down. A responsible approach is to put together a fair and reasonable set of controls for monitoring, for safety, for you know, making sure that neighborhoods are not disrupted by this, to make sure that abutters have their say in what's going on in their neighborhoods. You know, point again at Stiller as far as the argument made there about how this is totally incompatible with the neighborhood. So I don't think that we need to spend a lot of time looking for problems in Nahant. We're not going to find any. They're not logged in as that as far as the police reports are concerned. There probably really haven't been that much. So let's look around what everybody else has had for problems and what they've done about it.
Yeah, no, I firmly agree with that. And let's look at again all the bads about it that everywhere has, and then let's look at the goods about it. You know, we haven't. We've had a handful of folks call in. We've had a handful of folks that have a personal interest and, you know, say, well, this is what I do. We've had a handful of folks call in and say, you know, the opposite. But we haven't had, unfortunately, too many people call in with, you know, a middle of the road approach and say, hey, this is what I think, and logically. So I think that's been turned back to us to come up with now. I could rattle off 10 pros and 10 cons right now, and I think they'd all get us kind of thinking on both sides of the fence. You know, rather than just saying, hey, Linfield, in my opinion, sat back. What I read, that house was having celebrity parties at it. They sat back and didn't respond to a number of complaints made to the town by the neighbors. The town sat back on their hands and someone died there. So Linfield, unfortunately, you know, was pretty much up against it at that point. That's something to think about. You know, I think this town has been much more proactive. I think the police are pretty good here. I don't think this town would tolerate celebrity parties, but we did have one Airbnb or, you know, one short-term rental that was hosting weddings. And, you know, I certainly wouldn't want to buy a house and then have a wedding venue open next door to me. So that's the stuff I think we got to hone in on and say, hey, you know, this is what it is. And, you know, this is how we're going to approach it. And it's certainly about the neighbors in the community, but there's a financial gain for the town with Airbnb. You know, a town that I can't say entirely, but in my opinion, the town could probably use it, and it could be captured in a good way, and it could be utilized good. So again, I'll go back to my draft list, and hopefully I'll get it done before we get on to making these rules. But just what I see is the really bads and the really goods, and go from there. But Wayne, one last thing to you. If so an accessory use, single family house, someone lives there for the summer and they go away for the winter and they put their house up on Airbnb, would they zone their house once as
Well,
it has an
it doesn't
accessory
change the
use?
zoning, Steve. It's got nothing to do with that. It will become a matter of whether like right now, if you look into our zoning bylaw, There's some accessory uses that you have you can do as a matter of right. There's also some accessory uses that require a special permit. Whether or not we decide that short-term rental should be a matter of right or a special permit is yet to be decided. But it should still be listed as an accessory use.
That's a basic premise of our bylaws. You've got to list it. It didn't exist, obviously, when these bylaws were created. It's got to be added in. How it's treated after that, that's an entirely different issue.
No, I agree. I just think the sticking point, and you guys, I don't know how much time you've spent on Airbnb's website. The sticking point is going to be the definition that we use to define what a short-term rental is. Because if we're just going to say, if you go on the computer,
Just whatever decision the state of Massachusetts uses.
Yeah, I don't see us pulling anything out for Nahant specifically. The Chapter 337 Acts of 2018 short-term rental is clearly defined.
Yeah, I'd love to hear the definition just to try to.
I can read it to you if you'd like.
So they're right on the wall. Well, it's on the.
Steve's on his phone, so he can't see it.
Well, that's another reason why we got to do in-person meetings, because this is a pain in the ass. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I agree. All right. Well, I'll read up on that. My fault for not being in front of a computer, so I don't want to tie the committee's time up with reading that out. But yeah, that's my only concern is how, I think just like the bylaws, Wayne, it starts off with definitions. So someone could say, yeah, I didn't understand what an egress door meant. Well, the definition of egress door is right there in front of you. So I just think short-term rental, bang, that's the definition of it. That's how we determine that you are a short-term rental, and these are the rules that you're going to follow now that you are one. Because I'm just trying to think.
I think we're all looking to get the same thing done here, but all right. So anyway, so let's kind of move to any other subject at this point right now.
Wayne,
go ahead.
Are we reinventing the wheel here? I'm going to go back to the working draft that we started on.
No, we still have all that.
And we still have all of that. And literally, I was to the point where we could start stitching this together as far as just having it targeted for Nahant, but we needed one vote as far as how we were going to treat one of the different types of occupancies, because Cambridge excludes non-hosted short-term rentals.
Right. And so, right, exactly. And I don't personally have an issue with the concept of an unhosted rental. I mean, obviously, if any one of us was going to go away for, and decided we wanted to rent our house out while we were gone, that would be an unhosted rental, wouldn't it?
That's treated differently, actually. There are allowances made for that, even in Cambridge and all the other communities, as far as what would normally be a hosted rental, but the person is away for a period of time. The decision there in each of the cities or towns is how long that time span is that they are allowed to be away. Which, and unfortunately, a big part of the problem there is that it's unenforceable. If they say that you can only be away for 20 days, how can you possibly know if the person's been away for 40?
Well, again,
over the course of a year.
I'm not going to disagree with that, but there's a lot of stuff in all these regulations that we're talking about adopting that are essentially unenforceable.
Well, there is that too, but the issue that we see in all the communities, as we've talked about, is whether or not you've got an investor property that is sitting there, it's either vacant or it's occupied by people on a short-term rental basis.
Well, that's certainly a decision that I'm guessing that decision will ultimately not be up to this committee.
No,
because
but
I see that as something that's going to end up in front of town meeting.
I absolutely agree with you. In fact, I think it should be addressed separately by a vote. But as far as stitching together our recommendations, I suppose we can build around it and just leave that question open.
I think That's exactly what we're gonna end up doing, Rob, because I don't think it's really up to us to make that decision. The only thing we can do is maybe make a recommendation, but ultimately, I think that's probably if there's a single issue here that we're not gonna decide as a committee, that's the one. Okay, did I lose somebody?
I'm still here.
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
here.
I'm looking at the screen, but I can't see all the boxes anymore, so I can't tell like who's with us and who's not. There we
How's
go.
that?
Sounds great. All right. So this is where I'm at, guys. I think we need to actually start putting stuff on paper and just going line by line and saying yes and no. I don't see how we can do this over this foolish Zoom situation because I really find it very irritating. Can we
I
agree that we need to get together at town hall around a table with paper in hand and hash this thing out? Because I can't imagine how we're gonna do this on Zoom.
I agree. I could reach out to the town clerk and see if there's availability. I know the planning board lobbied to get back into the room downstairs. We unfortunately had one member that had COVID last week, so it brought to light the culture and the nature of everything still going on. But we did discuss, potentially getting back in there. I'm all for it too. I mean, I would, maybe we could still do some sort of hybrid so any citizens could call in, but.
I mean, wouldn't even know how to do that, but the issue is that, we're not like sitting here, each of us with this list or a draft, I should say, in hand and going down it item by item. And if everyone's not looking at the same screen, we can't even do it on the computer. Because you can't do it from the phone. You can't see the screen that Rob's putting up if you're on a telephone. I'm assuming that. Am I correct?
Correct.
All right. So we're going to be at a standstill here unless we're all in the same place. So I mean, my recommendation is that we have to schedule a meeting that we're going to actually go through this draft item by item and either adopt it or not adopt it, but we have to be all in the same place in order to make this happen.
And Wayne, I have a question.
Will
the public be allowed to come at that meeting? Hi, Wayne, it's Lorraine. Will we be able to be at that meeting also, or is it just going to be the board members?
Oh, all meetings are open to the public.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
There's no meeting that's not open to the public. You just have to get off your computer and go to the town hall.
Okay, yeah, I'm better with that too.
Well, again, I mean, I don't know how everyone else feels about all this computer stuff, but it's wearing on me very quickly.
Right.
Because we're talking back and forth now. We're not getting things accomplished with this committee. We should probably be done with this work by now, and we're not.
I absolutely agree with you.
Because we're not all sitting around a table hashing this stuff out.
Right.
That's my own viewpoint. I mean, I understand okay, there's still COVID stuff going around. We could be wearing masks. It's not like we're not allowed to wear a mask or something. We can still do that. I think we should get it done.
I absolutely agree.
I'd love it. I'd lobby for it. I can say just personal opinion. When the planning board switched to the Zoom, the meetings became 3 hours plus long. Obviously, the planning board meetings alternate, so every single Tuesday I am on my phone and very seldomly, but sometimes on my computer on Zoom. And it drags out. If we're there, one person takes the microphone and says their part, and maybe we have a whiteboard that we're jotting ideas down on, and it's just less of a chit chat phone conversation and more just get it done.
Okay, so let's work to that. We'll bring that up again before we adjourn. I'd like to invite, we seem to have any number of members of the general public on with us tonight. I would invite anybody to comment, ask a question, make a suggestion. Anybody? You can't all just be wanting to watch. Somebody must have something.
Excuse me, I'd like to ask a question. My name is Terry Clark. Terry Clark, I live on Furbush Road.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, is there any way maybe we could limit the amount of B&Bs in the town, like liquor licenses are limited, and just ask, and if not, we might have the potential for this town becoming more B&Bs than residential homes. My street alone
is that we can limit the number. Yes, we have that. We do have that authority. That's my understanding of it.
Okay, because my street alone has 4 houses on it, and 2 of them are Airbnbs, and the 3rd one is considering it. And also there's one right around the corner from me. So I basically live in a commercially zoned area right now, but I'm a residential home.
Again.
And so it would be nice to have limited amount of B&Bs in the town, and you'd just have to bid on, just like you do a liquor license, or at least streets. Streets shouldn't have so many B&Bs on it that I don't even know my neighbor. I have no neighbors.
You know, who knows how that number will work, but we do have the authority to limit it.
Okay, and the next question is how much is the town getting financially for an Airbnb, say?
I can tell that, Wayne, if you don't know.
You could probably tell us better.
It's, I'm sorry, ma'am. What was your name?
Terry Clark.
Terry. Hi, Terry. Steve Viviano.
Hi.
The town gets the same as sales tax. It's 6.25%. That is paid by the guest when they stay at the Airbnb. They pay directly through Airbnb. Airbnb sends that directly to the town. I don't think it's a quarterly basis. It might be a biannual basis, or potentially even annually, but I think it's more frequent than that. The lodger also pays directly a tax to the state, which is of course why you have to register with the state. So anybody with an Airbnb has to register with the state. The downside to it, you could register with the state for a treehouse tonight. The state doesn't put safety or even zoning first. They just put a tax ID number linked to your property, and your money goes to them. In talking with our town administrator, it was said the town will could potentially take in about $150,000 to $200,000 annually. You know, from this, that's a nice, healthy number that could help the town. But of course, you know, it concerns me what you just said. It's disheartening to think that someone feels like they're living in a commercially zoned area. I don't think that's worth any real.
Well, because I just want to throw out there that even though you could get $100,000, you know, to the town for revenue from this, we also ruin our neighborhoods. But also the school itself, like the 2 houses on my street, they don't have any. That's not families. So potentially they could have had 2 kids in each house. That would have been 4 kids going to the Johnson School, and what, at $9,000 or $10,000 a kid, we just lost $40,000 because the town gets like almost 10 grand for each kid, I believe, from the federal government or the state.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
right.
and all good points.
And that's just my street. Like, you know,
Yep.
I mean, I'm sure there's a whole bunch of them. And I mean, I've heard that they're even going to have a whole big, huge unit is being fixed up right now to have all Airbnbs in it. That potentially takes away a whole bunch more families with 2 kids per family, and the Johnson School loses. And that means the town loses.
Thank you, Terry.
Yeah.
Thank you, Terry.
Yeah.
Anyone else who would like to ask a question or make a comment?
Annie Wachtel here.
Yes, Annie.
Hi, I just want to say that as a real estate agent, I've noticed a big change. I probably get 3 or 4 people every open house who are looking at properties simply to buy them for Airbnb, which is very unusual.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, very
not
concerning.
what we want to hear, but I don't disbelieve you. Yes, absolutely.
So if there are going to be some changes, I think doing them sooner rather than later, because people are buying in this town as investment only and not taking residence. There are already 22 Airbnbs in town right now.
I think there's more than that. Okay, well, thank you for that information, Annie. Eric,
Wayne, I'm just asking the committee to make sure you do consider the numbers somehow. We have 6 direct abutters. 2 of the 6 are presently in some type of short-term rental condition. And I could see the others going rapidly.
really?
And we're going to be in the same condition as Ms. Clark, essentially bought in a residential zone to have it turn into a commercial zone.
Yeah, no, well, nobody wants to hear that. This is why we're doing this.
No,
Because
I understand, and I appreciate
Yeah.
that you're doing it. And I just think that I agree with your sense of sooner rather than later. And, it's happening fast.
thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments out there or questions? I heard a voice.
Well, one last remark is to Eric's point and Terry's. If that's occurring, their home values are going down.
Yeah.
You know what?
We're painfully aware of that.
Well, I'm sure there's probably somebody that will argue that opposite of that, but I mean, if these homes are such a great income producer, doesn't the value of the property go up?
They're
Only if
being
you're willing to
bid up.
sell it as an income
Probably,
producer.
I could be totally off the mark here, but is it? No, I don't know.
No,
I mean,
they-
personally, I
they-
don't understand why anyone would want to buy a house solely to use it as a Airbnb or similar use. But I guess I'm not understanding the numbers.
Wayne, the industry is pointing to, I think it was 80 days, 80 days or 85 days or something like that. As far as income off of one of these properties will pay the expenses for an entire year. So anything that they do after that is profit.
Okay, you're
So,
enlightening.
and the properties do get bid up by people who are trying to buy them strictly for investment purposes, which is why so many communities have banned that type of occupancy, because they can afford to. They can outbid the family with the kids because they're going to be making money out
Certainly.
of it.
Imagine if somebody has enough money to buy a property solely to invest in this situation, then yeah, I'm sure they're going to outbid anyone that has. Okay.
I
Any
can
other-
divulge, I mean, my input on the financial, it's like anything, we all have jobs here and you could do something differently. You could change your career entirely and you could, go find the next get rich quick scheme. I think to Annie's point, it actually works the opposite, which you could argue from either standpoint. If you're looking to come into Nahant and buy your first starter home, well, now you're going to spend $750. I don't think that is even double digits related to Airbnb. But again, to Annie's point, if the perfect family with 2 kids was ready to buy a house for $699 and someone offered $710 just to exclusively Airbnb it, that's disheartening. But again, that's a stretch, and that's a guess, and that's kind of a fabricated story to cast a certain light. As far as someone buying an Airbnb and renting it exclusively on Airbnb, that's a different story. Rob, what you said, the 85 nights, I'd have to crunch numbers and see. I'm sure there's a lot of logic and math out there, but of course it first depends on what you bought your house for, what your interest rate is, and how much you're renting your Airbnb for, and what your carrying costs are. From my experience, it's not really a get rich quick scheme, but there is a whole different side of it that the average person probably doesn't see. You know, the average person probably doesn't have a rental property. First thing, moratoriums are pretty scary in the state of Massachusetts. I think that's why you've seen an uptick in Airbnbs. Nobody wants to have a tenant that has been told by the state, you can not pay your rent for 18 months and you can't get evicted. You know, that's pretty tough. None of us would probably go to work tomorrow if the state told your boss, you don't have to pay your employees, but they still have to come to work. You know, we'd all stop going to work. So the logic behind people being allowed to stay in places and a landlord struggling to pay their rent, that's something that I haven't experienced, and I'm not going to sit here and preach about it, but that's something I don't think anyone would really understand until you experienced it. So I have friends, I have colleagues, coworkers, family members, they have Airbnb places, and it's not so much to go get rich quick. It's that's what they have. That's the tool they have. And, that apartment one day might have housed a family of 4, and now it's spun into an Airbnb. Maybe it's more lucrative. Maybe it's less lucrative. The side that's appealing to me about the Airbnb, it's left to the general public to decide. If you list your place on Airbnb and you rent it 4 times and you have someone in the cellar, that's not a legal place and it's not very habitable, those people are going to be pretty vocal online and they're going to tear your unit apart. And if Airbnb doesn't throw you off the platform, nobody will rent from you anyways, because you just got some bad marks against you. And furthermore, what the woman said about kids going to school, I think that's an interesting point. I didn't know if the state actually gives the town money, because I read something in a course that whoever writes the article, they're going to shine the light the way they want. It was saying how Airbnbs save the town money. You don't have kids living in a rental going to a school that now the school has to pay more teachers, more staff, more whatever. There's less resources. There's less resources needed for that place. Because I think the average Airbnb I read, and this is a nationwide average, but it was somewhere 40 to 50%. So again, when we cast all of these ideas and thoughts and facts, whatever Airbnb brings, whatever problems versus whatever a normal rental would bring, Airbnb is going to bring 50% of whatever we're thinking, because it's probably only going to be rented 50% of the time. So another thing to keep in light, pros that I've seen from Airbnb, that I've heard from my own personal experience, if you have rules and you have regulations, it's nice. We all have families. We probably all don't have 8 bedrooms in our house. People can come here. They can stay. People come to weddings here. The town makes some money off the wedding venue facilities, I'm sure, but those people come and they leave, and they can't stay here. Maybe they can get a slice of pizza before they go to the wedding, but aside from that, there's nothing the town's really getting out of it, besides 5 to 6 trolleys driving through every weekend. It's nice to be able to accommodate, and I love the people that have been from town, and they go on to spill their history with the town and how this is a residential community and that, and I think that's great. But we're never going to change the fact this is an attractive community in the summer, and it has been historically for as long as I've read up on the Nahant Historical Society via Facebook. But we've had hotels, we've had lodging, we've had all of that. Now we have none of that. But we do have people that Uber in here. We do have people that illegally park every weekend to go to the beach. We do have probably 1,000 people per weekend coming into the Ocean View to go to weddings and the other facilities that I think are ramping up to do weddings. So I think for Nahant to tastefully be able to capture a piece of that would be a good business move. But when you mix business with people's livelihoods and people's homes, that's tough. So I personally think everybody on here brings something great to the table. We should listen to it all, but we should really take into consideration the full spectrum with whatever rules and whatever regulations we're going to have.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, great, Steve. Thank you, Steve. Any other?
I have another question. It's Terry Clark again. I
Go
was
ahead,
just curious, can our infrastructure actually handle the influx of people that the B&Bs are gonna bring into the town? Because most B&Bs can rent to people like, say, 6 or 8 people to a small house. And usually, like in a regular family, you may not have that many people. So if all the Airbnbs were rented at the top scenario, they're all filled to the max, what
Right.
can our police department and our fire department handle? Do we know those numbers? Like, can they handle, is it like one cop to so many people, or like one firefighter to so many people?
That's a good question, Terry. I wouldn't have any idea how to figure that out.
Would the
Obviously,
chief?
if you compare, if you're going to compare, well, one of the things that we're going to do in this regulations that we're adopting is to regulate the number of people in an Airbnb per bedroom, and regulate the number of bedrooms. So you're not going to get 40, 50, 60 people renting a small house. That's definitely not going to be allowed.
Well, I know one of the B&Bs on my street had a tent, they had the people in the house and a tent. So, and then what do I do? Do I call the police and say they have a tent out?
We have our rules in place. They won't. See, that's
Hopefully.
why we have rules. That's one of the things that we want to protect against. It's like, how can you rent out a tent? That's not a habit.
Well, they wouldn't be renting. They wouldn't be renting out. They've rented out the house. Again, it's a house that is either unoccupied.
Because we have no regulation and no control over this right now. That's the kind of stuff that can happen. It wouldn't happen with these regulations that we're proposing, because it'll be a prohibited use, and if you do that, you're going to be in violation of your permit.
And I guess the next question I have.
Okay.
Wayne?
Yes.
May I ask a question to circle around to the beginning of the meeting?
Yeah, go ahead.
If I understood the discussion correctly, I understood that this use is a not permitted use in the town presently.
Correct.
And so may I ask why it's occurring?
That's another good question.
I can answer some of
that. I have
that.
no answer for it.
I can answer some of that.
Go ahead, Rob.
Back in 2013, I approached the planning board about rules and about the short-term rentals that were occurring in my neighborhood. The planning board told me that it was allowed under the boarders and lodgers provision in section 4. Now, okay, there wasn't a lot of case law on the issue at that point. The state hadn't defined what was happening. So it was difficult to make an argument. But one thing that was unfortunately happening is that in the boarders and lodgers, it's limited to 2 people living with the resident family. And the rentals that were occurring in town were nothing like that. Who knows how many people were in the house and whether there was a resident family there or not, but that left the door open. And that's what got it started. And it's basically just grown unwatched, unpoliced since then. It's just grown without any rules at all.
But presently it is a violation of our zoning ordinance.
That would be the opinion of the Supreme Judicial Court of the state of Massachusetts, yes.
And our own bylaw, which says that if it isn't listed as approved, then it's not approved.
That's correct. And that's
if I understand, Wayne, if I understand you correctly, it's the opinion of our building inspector as well.
That would be me.
I'm aware.
Yes,
Ouch.
it is my opinion as a private citizen that none of these places should exist right now. But I don't have, let's put it this way, I've not been given any direction as to how to go about halting it.
Understood. Thank you.
And guys, if Steve here, if I could chime in to the gentleman that just asked the question. The towns closest to us have the same situation. A short-term rental is not an accessory use. It's not a use. It's not anything. It's considered, and as Wayne pointed out, the Massachusetts Supreme Court did have a case that they did rule that this was a different use, but just because of what just transpired, I think sounds alarming. It sounds like there's a whole bunch of people out there that should be shackled up and hauled off to prison for breaking the bylaws. But I think in any other town that this is happening, similar to Nahant, that have no rules and regulations, it's simply because it's being viewed as a residential application, just like if you rented your house on a month-to-month basis. I think it's up to the town to create the definition that there's a difference between renting your house long-term or month-to-month or whatever we're going to call it versus renting it short-term. Once we create that definition, then I think we could change it. But right now, I think the other towns have not done anything about it, and they're not out locking people up simply because it's just renting your house on a cell phone or on a computer rather than through a real estate agent or whatever, a flyer hanging up in Seaside Pizza.
Right. I definitely agree with Steve's viewpoint on this. It's because it's such a kind of a new technology, and you know, we rarely keep up with our own technology, and that's why, because it's not specifically addressed in bylaws and uses and so forth and so on, we're, you know, like we're behind the times. We're catching up. And so that's essentially where we're at.
Yeah. To me, it's a lot like, too, I don't even know how we could stop it, but you know, if you go down to Short Beach on a warm day, you'll have 15 cars lined up on the sidewalk. You'll have a bunch of cars illegally parked, but then you'll have 15 cars lined up on the sidewalk. And the one common characteristic will be the Uber or the Lyft neon sign in the back window. How do you stop them? I don't really know. I know the town put a sign that suggested that Ubers drop off at the far end of Long Beach, but you know how do you really stop that?
You don't.
You know, we can't put up. So hopefully in time they'll figure ways.
We used to limit the people on the beach by making it very difficult to park. It's not an issue anymore because they don't park. They just get dropped off, picked up later.
Right.
You know, again, we're being outgunned by technology.
Absolutely, 100%.
So what's our next step here?
All right. So, well, be honest with you, I think we need to sit down and just go through our sure. I'm drawing a blank. The outline.
The working draft?
Yeah, that thing. But I think that's where we need to go. I don't see any way to do this without sitting around a table. So I'm going to make the suggestion that we will adjourn this meeting. Then we'll speak to someone at town hall to schedule an in-person meeting, and then we can figure out what that schedule will be and announce our next meeting at that point. Does that
Wayne,
sound?
I'm going to recommend that we get the big room. I
don't care what room we're in. It doesn't bother me one way or another. I just think we need to sit around a table, push papers back and forth at each other, and hash this thing out. Get it on paper so we get everything that we think we want to put on a piece of paper down on a paper, and work from there. We're just kind of going around in circles. with the Zoom thing. Does anyone disagree with that viewpoint?
I think we made
it
some
sounds
very
great.
good progress when we were sticking to that list, and just read down through it and said yes or no, but we never, we get through it and then we get distracted and go off in a different direction and then we loop back to it. And so regardless of whether we use the working draft or pull some other template, we've got to look at some sort of a format and stick to it.
I'm with you. So let's do this. Let's each on our own, in between now and whenever our next meeting happens, find the document that you love that relates to this subject, whether it's something that came from Lynn, Salem, Boston, Cambridge, I don't care where it came from. Bring it with you. If there's a line item in there that we think needs to be in our list, then we'll put it in our list. If we don't think it needs to be there, we'll vote to leave it out. I think that's the way to make this thing happen. That's my suggestion. Obviously, it's a little bit of homework for each of us, but you know what? This meeting doesn't have to happen in that big of a hurry, but sooner is better. Let's get it done.
Okay, let's give it a shot.
All right, so let's kind of part with that idea. And we'll get together with the people in charge of the building and we'll decide when that next meeting should be. We can toss the emails around to make sure we can all make it. And then we'll schedule the meeting and we'll post it accordingly.
Next meeting should be June 14th if we follow our
So
schedule.
if we can make that happen, that's when it will happen. And if it can't be then you will find a different date, but let's work on that.
Okay.
All right.
I will work, and if Rob, if you can send the most recent list, and again, like Wayne said, let's all take whatever we think and go from there. I think the list you had was good, but I think there's some other things that should be looked at. And, my opinion is some of that stuff on the list is completely irrelevant. So maybe we'll all draft our own list.
Right, we're all going to bring our own wish list with us when we meet next. We'll work from there. So I think that's the only reasonable thing to do at this point.
Yep.
Otherwise, we're going to be we'll be circling this same drain in September.
Right. They'll be saying in 10 years from now that there was a committee formed and nothing happened.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so we got a motion to it, made and seconded to adjourn. John?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Meeting adjourned 7:01 PM. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Public that are in here asking questions and helping out. Thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you, guys.